thank you for joining us in a 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence in memory of George Floyd, who was unjustly killed in Minneapolis. We will be recognizing George Floyd on an agenda item at the end of our regular items and talking about an anti-racism declaration. To start the meeting tonight, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember James?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Here.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Here.
Councilmember Polika?
Here.
And Mayor Piana.
Here. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and I have learned that we have a guest joining us tonight, which is Commissioner Helene Zach, and I recommend we slate her as Presentation A. And we also have an amendment to the the City Council Declaration of Commitment to Anti-Racism, which is 8C, and we need to amend the agenda to accept the amendment that we are proposing tonight. Are there any other requests or changes to the agenda at this time? If not, let's entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we accept the agenda as recommended by the mayor.
Support.
Moved by Polika, supported by Leaks May. Madam Clerk, can we have roll call or a vote call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. Next is the electronic meeting procedures. We are still under executive orders of the Open Meetings Act that are requiring public bodies to be able to do remote meetings via any electronic mode they've selected. We are using Zoom. And tonight, the public participation is going to be the same as it has been since March. And our Assistant City Manager, Kyle Pollette, is going to be taking us through public participation during call to audience and any other agenda item where we have audience speak. And we take the order of comments via Zoom participants who raise their interest in speaking by hitting the raise your hand button if you are participating by Zoom. And then we go by alphabet last name order if you are calling in by phone. Dan, Chris, did I cover everything appropriately without reading the entire thing?
Mayor, I do think you encapsulated the policy that council adopted, and that would be in order. I think you had touched on that any public comment, whether it's on an item specifically on an agenda item or whether it's the general call to audience, will be held at one time. And comments will be limited to 3 minutes as normal, consistent with the council's rule of procedure.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on to presentations is I welcome Commissioner Helene Zach joining us.
My audio and start my video. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can't see you yet. There you are.
Here I am. So just briefly, I am working very hard as your county commissioner, particularly navigating how we spend the 219 million CARES dollars. And coming your way, we did approve $35 million for cities, villages, townships, and authorities, so that you can apply for the 25% fees that are not covered by FEMA and other types of expenses that you've had to take on because of COVID. So I'm really excited. Library authorities can apply. Separately, senior citizen groups and other types of authorities can also apply. And there will be money coming for school systems too. Last week we issued a $10 million grant opportunity for nonprofits. Again, it's all got to be for COVID related responses. And I hope that there will be Ferndale nonprofits. You need to be a 501c3, have different expenses. To apply for that, you can either find the grant listing at United Way for Southeast Michigan website. There's a link to it, or also on the county website under COVID. And I'm on the oversight committee overseeing how we administer those grants. Lots of other framework that I had a long meeting discussing, more economic development grants. Joy Wells is going to be very happy because we're talking about doing some grants to the chambers because they really support our small businesses. Another talking about the concept of an economic recovery grant to help the next line of businesses such as salons, restaurants, and so forth, come back into recovery. So lots happening, and I'll keep you posted. Any questions for me?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say it's good to see you.
Good to see all of you too, and I look forward to the presentation tonight.
Yes, thank you for all your hard work on behalf of our communities.
Thank you for everything you do.
All right. Next on the agenda is the call to audience. We allow call to audience for up to a half hour. We did have a rule change back in March with call to audience, and that you can speak on any topic related to or unrelated to the agenda. Managing the call to audience is our Assistant City Manager, Kyle Pollette, and we are starting with Zoom participants. Please raise your interest in speaking using the raise your hand button under the participant list, and he will enable your sound and video to join the meeting. And then we will move on to those who wish to speak by phone via alphabetical order. Kyle, why don't you take us forward, please?
Thank you, Mayor. We have no raised hands at the moment, but if we just wait a moment, we might get some. And as the Mayor said, if you're unfamiliar with Zoom, on the bottom of your screen, you'll find the participants button. Click that, and at the bottom of that panel, you'll have the option to raise your hand. Once you've activated that, I'll be able to call on you. And Mayor, while we wait, if I may, I can go to the call-in listeners.
Please do.
Okay, we'll start. Last four of the phone number is 0719. 0719. If you have any comments, the floor is yours.
I do not have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is 3145.
Good evening, Kyle. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good evening,
Okay.
Mike.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Buenas noches. Good evening. My name is Augusto Mike Flores on Whittington Street, and I am pro Ferndale. Over the last few weeks, I've gotten to understand why I am so pro Ferndale. As our community has shown solidarity against racism and injustice, but we must recognize that we have a long way to go. It's hard to recognize our sad reality. I have failed as a minority ally. I have failed as a Latino ally. I have failed as an ally. If we are truthful with ourselves, I think we all will acknowledge we all have failed as allies. Our failure to make sure all Black lives matters means we must do more to hold ourselves accountable. I will ask Council to move the declaration from a symbolic gesture to something that is meaningful and actionable for our community. I will ask Council to move this declaration to actually be elevated to our strategic meetings and our master plan. I know that these two documents are extremely important to Council, as they are always referenced when something needs to move forward. And I think that something as important as this declaration needs to be documented on such documents. If I may, I would like to move to some of the agenda items. As it relates to the budget, I just have a question in regards to why we continue to approve funding and expenditures against a preliminary budget. I know that one of the agenda items is a request for $85,000 for some consulting fees. And I urge Council, if those kinds of expenses can be postponed until we have a fully approved budget. My fear is that approval under a preliminary budget doesn't really allow us to question that expense in the future, because it's basically approved and move forward. Addition, I would like to end on a positive note. I would like to thank Council for their visibility and presence over the last two weekends at the two rallies and marches over the weekend. I know that I've gotten a chance to speak to many people on Council, in particular Councilwoman Mikulski, Councilwoman Bruno James, to address some concerns that I've had, and maybe how we as a community can move forward and heal from the last 2 weeks. That's all for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Mayor, next we have raised hand. It's Joy Wells. Go ahead, Joy.
Good evening, Joy.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Thank you both, Mayor and Council. I wanted to take the opportunity to thank a whole lot of people that were a part of the distribution of the PPE kits, as well as provide an update on where we are with that distribution. So the county has provided 10,000 of these PPE kits for small businesses in the Oakland County communities. We, over the course of the 2 days that we did distribution last week, we've had approximately 260 businesses register for the kits, and we've had about 200 of the kits picked up. I will be back over at 1938 Burdette Street tomorrow between the hours of 11 and 2 for any of the businesses that have not yet picked up their kits. Additionally, I still have 200 kits remaining. The link is still live on the oaklandcounty.gov website for business to register. And in the event you're unable to register before coming to pick up a kit tomorrow, just show up and I can add your information to a list and later provide it to the county. But we still have plenty of those kits. And I want to say thank you to Jerome of Blooms, who allowed us to store some of this equipment over at his facility for staging until our distribution dates, as well as thank Rufino at Valentine Distilling, who generously donated a lot of hand sanitizer to supplement some of these kits. I had many volunteers, and thank you to Jordan of the CED, as well as Lena and Summer of the DDA, who were phenomenal in coordinating all of the communication efforts with the business community on coordinating these dates. It's been very successful, and thank you to our Oakland County executive and our commissioners who have been amazing at providing these important resources for our small businesses.
Thank you, Joy, for that update, and thank you. I know that you have steered this project on behalf of the city and the DDA and the chamber. So thank you for leading and being a champion of the effort and getting these out to the businesses. We appreciate you.
Mayor, next is Brian Stowawe.
Good evening, Brian.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and City staff. My name is Brian Stowawe. I live at 437 College Street. And I just wanted to bring up a few things that's in the recent issues around the police departments around the country. I want to first thank Mike for his comments. I think we share the same sentiments where I think a resolution is good for council, but we need to have more action than just some words. I think we need to have some actual change and real changes made. There's a few demands I think that the city needs to have. We need to really look at defunding the police and transfer some of that budget to the schools, public housing, social workers, etc., where that can make a real difference and where we don't catch the problem after the fact, we're fixing it up front. Next would be creation of a Citizens Police Accountability Board that would fix any issues that do arise, and it would act as a deterrent for any officers in the future if anything were to happen there. I think we also need to look at how we use our police, and that we don't need guns. We don't need lethal officers at every single scene. I called the police before just because I locked my keys in my house, and it even made me nervous just having an officer there trying to jimmy the lock with a gun on his hip. I don't think we need guns to go to all these calls like that. Mental health calls, same thing. Insurance claim reports for stolen property. We don't need guns at the scene. Next, we need to remove the school resource officer. We don't need police in the schools. The other one is something that the partnership we created last year with the Amazon app, the Ring Neighbors app. Right now, this doesn't have facial recognition technology, but Amazon is also working on facial recognition technology. And this app just gives incentive to turn residents into informants throughout the city. And lastly, I think this is probably the easiest one of all. I think everybody on council, any progressive leadership would agree that removing and banning all reactionary symbols of racism and hate, Lives Matter flags, the thin blue line flags, the Punisher logos, any of that stuff needs to go, like, immediately. And I think if we want to be a real progressive city and lead the other surrounding cities, the county and the state, I think we need to really do these things, and that's what I did tonight.
All right. Thank you.
Mayor, we have another call-in I want to give the opportunity to speak, and that's last four digits 2159. You're unmuted. Well, it looks like they didn't want to speak. I think they may have hung up.
Excellent.
I see no other raised hands, and all of the call-ins have been given an opportunity to speak, Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you, Kyle. Call to audience is now closed, and we're moving on to the next agenda item, which is the consent agenda, which is quite lengthy this evening. Does council have any requests with the consent agenda? If not, I request a motion.
I move
that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Moved by Mikulski and supported by Leaks May. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Apollico?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. So now I'm going to read each item, and on the agenda, oh, I kind of did that backwards. I'm just going to read them so everybody knows what they are. 7A, approval of minutes of regular council virtual meeting held May 26, 2020, is submitted by the city clerk. 7B, approval of the resolution for the city's request for reimbursement from Oakland County under the West Nile Virus Program, and that the city clerk be authorized to sign as submitted by DPW Director. Approval of 7C, approval of the proclamation recognizing May 15th through June 15th, 2020 as Tourette Syndrome Awareness Month in the city of Ferndale, as submitted by Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May. 7D, approval of the payment to Diversified Electric in the amount of $16,748.84 for replacement of main electrical work, panel replacement, and safety service disconnect to Fire Station 2 from the following account. Capital outlay is submitted by the fire chief. 7E, approval of the agreement with Resource X for enhanced financial budgeting and scenario software implementation in the amount of $11,500 from the appropriate account as listed, as submitted by city manager. 7F, approval of the sale of firewood processed by DPW, deposit proceeds and tree account as listed, as submitted by DPW director. 7G, approval of purchase order to Wensco for sign shop material in the amount of $25,000. The expense to be charged to Major Street signs repair and maintenance account as listed. Signs repair and maintenance account number also as listed, submitted by DPW Deputy Director. 7H, approval to purchase a Roland VG 2540 54-inch printer with accessories for the DPW sign shop in the amount of $16,473.24, charged to local streets, capital outlay account number listed as submitted by Deputy DPW Director. 7I, approval to purchase 50 acrylic counter shields from Second Story Interiors LLC for payment at polling locations at a cost of $4,750 to be charged to COVID reimbursement, account number as listed, as submitted by city clerk. 7J, approval to purchase 2 Salisbury 4975 courier boxes for use as ballot drop boxes to be located in the City Hall and Kulik Center parking lots at a total cost of $1,527.90 to be charged to the appropriate account under election supplies as submitted by city clerk. 7K, approval of traffic control order 2020-01, removal of no turn on red sign at northbound Republic and 9 Mile as submitted by police chief. And 7L, approval of resolution of ordinance amendments to Chapter 7, business regulation and licenses generally, Section 7-249, application requirements for massage establishment license as submitted by city attorney. 7M, approval of summer 2020 special assessments to be added to the tax roll as submitted by finance director. 7N, approval of the bills and payrolls as submitted by the city manager's office and subject to review by the Council Finance Committee. Quite a few things tonight, and Council has passed the consent agenda.
If I may,
Yeah.
through the chair, I
Yeah.
neglected to announce that I would definitely like to read the proclamation regarding May 15th to June 15th as Tourette syndrome.
I thought you would be interested in doing that, so please go ahead.
At a regular meeting of the City Council, the City of Ferndale, Oakland County, Michigan, held virtually on June 8th, 2020, the following resolution was moved and supported. An estimated 3 in every 1,000 children 6 to 17 years of age in the United States are diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. And Tourette syndrome is defined as a group of childhood onset neurodevelopmental conditions known collectively as tic disorders, which become evident in early childhood or adolescence. And individuals with Tourette syndrome are affected by tics, which are involuntary, rapid, sudden movements or vocalizations that occur repeatedly. And individuals with Tourette syndrome face periodic changes in nature, frequency, and severity of their tics without forewarning. And individuals with Tourette syndrome frequently have co-occurring conditions that complicate their care and diagnosis and cause more impairments than the tics themselves, including attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, mood disorders, learning disabilities, handwriting difficulties, executive function disorder, and sensory processing disorder. And Tourette syndrome has historically been misinterpreted and considered to be a condition of emotional disturbance instead of a condition of chemical biology. And children with Tourette syndrome are often disciplined for manifestations of their disability by educators who fail to understand that the child is unable to control their tics and that the child may be delayed in their maturity and emotional responses. And individuals with Tourette syndrome may face discrimination while dealing with their unpredictable disorder. And individuals with Tourette syndrome are intelligent and capable of great contributions to society when given proper supports. Understanding this disorder will help guarantee hope for acceptance and a better future for individuals with Tourette syndrome. Therefore it be resolved that the Mayor and Council recognize May 15th through June 15th, 2020 as Tourette Syndrome Awareness Month in the City of Ferndale, and be it further resolved that the City of Ferndale acknowledge the needs of individuals with neurological impairment and urge all residents to support Tourette Syndrome awareness and education and in order to assist those individuals and families who deal with this neurobiological disorder every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Next, we're moving on to the regular agenda, and the first item is 8A, consideration of the contract with Tool Design in the amount of $85,025 for the Ferndale Mobility Plan update from the account number 202-000-977 capital outlay and 202-000-818 major roads as submitted by planning manager. Do we have Mr. Lyons joining us this evening to introduce this item? There you are.
We do. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have a brief presentation that can go along with this conversation if I'm able to cue that up, Kyle. Looks like it is working. Cool. Can you see the PowerPoint? Just want to confirm.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Just for the record, I'm Justin Lyons, Planning Manager for the city. I just wanted to provide you and the community with an overview of the process that staff and some community members are starting to update the city's mobility plan, which is Ferndale Moves. So some of you may not be familiar with what a mobility plan is or what Ferndale Moves is, but As you may have heard some staff and council talk about in the past, the city has a complete streets ordinance, which was enacted prior to 2014, and that required that the city adopt a non-motorized transportation plan. So that Ferndale Moves plan was adopted in 2014. That plan sought to make Ferndale an even better place for walking, biking, and taking transit. And so really three key factors of that plan back in 2014 was providing multiple modes of transportation options, improving safety, and creating placemaking opportunities. That plan resulted in an interactive website called FerndaleMoves.com. That website has been updated a number of times, I think, over the years, and so I just included a snapshot of what that looks like. But over the past 6 years, the current plan has really guided implementation of a number of projects that focus on really all of those three key items. Those projects were primarily within the city, but also partnered with neighboring communities, even included Mogo Bike Share that recently launched last week. So those projects have really aligned with this overall plan, but also found alignment with the city's master plan and city council strategic plan. So really it is tied within everything that Ferndale does. So that last plan from 2014, again, was a while ago, but it did sort of set a regional benchmark for complete streets and implemented a number of those recommendations related to walking, biking, parking, transit, even some zoning ordinance amendments. So, this is just a small snapshot, one slide of really what's been going on, but the city's been awarded over $2 million in federal and state grants to help complete a lot of these projects. So we're talking about projects on Livernois, we're talking about Woodward Heights, even the core downtown, some of the original narrowings of 9 Mile, those were all part of this plan and were helped paid for by a lot of these grants. Those grants have helped reduce overall capital costs when it comes to actually putting, these implementation items in the ground. And then, I think a lot of people can hopefully see that, this has helped made Ferndale a more walkable, bikeable place, helped kind of resurgent or add some momentum behind downtown and other parts of the city, just simply because people are able to walk and bike and wheelchair and get to more places around the city. As I said earlier, we've partnered with a lot of neighboring communities on grants. A lot of times, when we've written grants, we've reached out to our neighbors and said, hey, is there any way that we can work with you on West 9 Mile if you're Oak Park, or trying to roll out regional bike share. So we've had, really partnered with all the communities around us, which I think has been important, and they've seen a lot of the projects that we've talked about actually be implemented and move forward. The city recently had a Cobalt Community Survey, and one of the focus areas of that was transportation. And compared to other communities in the Midwest, compared to national cities that are around our size, Ferndale really scored above everyone else with an 81. And so if you take a look at the community survey for that, you'll see where we ranked. And really, like I said, this is just one slide that captures a lot of projects that happened even before I started at the city, working at the city. And so I encourage people to check out the Ferndale Moves website at ferndalemoves.com. And then there's some other links in this presentation, which is part of the agenda, that talk about everything that mobility related that we worked on in 2019, and then also a current map with MOGO stations and bike lanes and things like that to help you plan and see things that have been done recently. So, I think a lot of people would want to know, why does Ferndale need a mobility plan? So we really, I think the previous plan, I didn't work at the city at the time, but did admire the amount of community engagement and feedback. People at the time had filled out basically a Google map and provided, problem areas of where they saw issues around the city and how could we make things a little bit safer for families and people walking, and all sorts of different transportation things to consider. And I think that the previous plan did a good job of community engagement, but I think that council's expectation and the community's expectation is a lot more feedback as part of this plan. And there's so many other ways to communicate and get feedback from the residents about what this plan would be. So Our goal is to have an equitable and inclusive community-driven plan. So that means, all ages and abilities. That means people in wheelchairs. That means, people that are just coming to Ferndale for work. Really we want to cast a wide net, and I think we can do that, and I'll explain some of those ways coming up. We're looking to plan for not just what does the streets look like in Ferndale today, but what are the future modes of transportation that we need to be thinking about. When we were looking at some of the responses from firms interested in working with Ferndale, there was a lot of talk about curb space and other like autonomous vehicles and other things that we should be thinking about that really weren't even on the radar the last time that this plan was created and updated. The plans really need to consider all people that live, work, visit, own businesses all within Ferndale. And so we also want to talk or consider sustainability, and that's a big focus of this plan. We really see this as the first phase of climate action planning for the city. There's already sustainability work being done. Some of the recent projects related to transportation have helped give other people options to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint, but we know that just nationwide transportation is one of the top emitters of greenhouse gases, and so how can we continue to help limit that? As I said before, there's plan alignment, there's ordinance alignment with going forward with a mobility plan, but this type of plan really does set policies and programs. So we don't just talk about people walking, we don't just talk about people biking, we talk about zoning ordinances amendments that really shape how things are built in the future in the city and how those can be consider ADA requirements and consider how people might travel in the future. As I said, the city's been very fortunate to be awarded over $2 million in grant funds because of the first plan, really, when people like SEMACOG and MDOT are looking to award projects for transportation projects that cover a lot of different modes. Really, number one on the list is, do you have a complete streets ordinance? And number two is, do you have a mobility or transportation plan? And so it's nice that we can check off that box right now, but having an updated plan makes that even more powerful when we're asking for funds from grant agencies. It helps with budgeting and capital improvement planning. I mentioned the regional collaboration. But I think, the other important thing is being equitable and inclusive. This reducing transportation costs helps with affordability. So, if you're giving people more opportunity to not always have to pay, have a car payment and force people to drive, if they're able to walk or bike to their grocery store and things like that, that helps them be able to stay in Ferndale longer and live more portably. There's benefits to public health and then accessibility, something that I know the Accessibility and Inclusion Commission has really been talking about. And so what's nice is we do have representation as part of this plan. One of the commissioners is one of our steering committee members, and I'll get more into that in a moment. Regarding, really our current climate, COVID-19 is, mobility has definitely been something that has changed quite a bit over these past few months. To actually appropriately social distance, there's more need for public space. I don't know about anybody else, but I've seen so many people use bike lanes. They've now really become more of people lanes. People need more space for walking and jogging, strollers, bikes. I've seen skateboards. So really those have turned into people lanes, which is kind of fortunate that we have that space. We're learning, obviously right now we're at a virtual meeting. We've learned different ways to get community engagement. And so I think that is evolving and will evolve as part of this plan as well. We may not always be able to have a big giant community meeting. It may be different ways that people can contribute on a solo effort or in smaller groups or online. But thinking about everyone that could possibly communicate. Some people may not want to use Zoom, and so we can figure out other ways to get people to interact. And it's also an opportunity to test and try new layouts that prioritize public space. So maybe thinking a little bit differently about how people are getting downtown and what spaces they'll need to walk to and get to in some of those tighter areas of the city. So as the agenda item was titled, there is the city did request some proposals for a firm to assist staff with this plan and assist the community with this plan. So there was an RFP or a request for proposals that was issued. And on the left side, I won't go through all of these, but really this was just the baseline information that we wanted to hear from anyone who'd be interested in working with our community. So we wanted to update this plan to make it equitably reflect the current and future mobility needs of the community. There was a general scope of work, which is really just like the agenda of how a firm would tackle this sort of project. So we need to know a schedule. We need them to come visit and interact with the community. We need to know what that community engagement is because, like I said, that's really a key success factor of this plan. We need to know what their estimated cost would be, some examples of recent projects, and then get to know the firm a little bit as they're trying to get into this community. So we included selection criteria in the request proposal as well, just to set the tone of so you're applying for this, and the community will be selecting based on this specific criteria. So there weren't really any wild cards. We wanted to make sure that the firms actually had the professional skills to do this sort of plan, had the experience, and really understand Ferndale and what the community's needs are for a plan like this. And so I just want to take a quick break. I don't know if any of the steering committee members are here, but just, this is very early in the process, but just want to thank them for participating. I had them, involved in reviewing each of these proposals. The city did receive 8 proposals from firms in Michigan and outside of Michigan. So we had a good mixture of representation from commissions that deal with mobility. So Planning Commission, Accessibility Commission, like I mentioned, Sustainability. We also had a youth representative, which I felt was important, and a senior member of the committee as well. And then we had a wide variety of departments participate. And so these are the departments that I kind of informally call the Ferndale Moves team, because we're always working together on what transportation projects are coming up and getting buy-in from each other. So appreciate all of their help and the help going forward. So as I said, we did review 8 really qualified proposals. I think the city should be very proud. All of these firms really wanted to work with the city, and based on all of the feedback from the steering committee, and based on the proposals and interviews we had, Tool Design was the recommended partner going forward. And really, most of the firms I think really did do a great job. And so, we're very fortunate. A lot of people want to work with Ferndale, but Tool Design really stood out because of their innovative community engagement. So they didn't just focus on digital means, which I think is very important, especially in this COVID-19 pandemic response time period. And so they came up with some very clever ideas that everything from people having solo audits where they could have a piece of paper that basically they can walk down, let's say 9 Mile, and write down all the things that are issues for them as a pedestrian, and thinking about it, as if their grandmother was walking down 9 Mile, what would they see that would be an issue? They included signs where people could, text or provide feedback other ways. Digital town halls as well, and ways that people can interact via web map. So really they included a lot of different responses, which I appreciated. They also had a really strong equity focus. So they want to make sure that the community is bought into this plan, and not just the people that you see on bike. They want to get feedback from everyone. And so they really, throughout their proposal, which was included in the packet, they really hold themselves to a high standard regarding equity and inclusivity. So I encourage folks to look at that. But they were really the #1 firm that really focused on that item. They had a really community-wide focus. They understand that, this is not a project that's solely focused on downtown. It should be a citywide look at things. And so they did a great job of that. And then really how they presented their responses in general, I think, was really well organized. And they answered all the steering committee's questions, and were very helpful with that. They also showed a lot of experience, not only just locally here. The city has worked with Tool Design in the past, but they've also worked with the City of Detroit and Ann Arbor. They've had some other work in the Midwest, and also they have worked nationally other places as well. Variety of communities, different sizes, some that are smaller than us, some that are the same size, and obviously some larger ones. But they showed a lot of range that they can complete this type of project. As outlined in the staff report, there was an overall project budget. So this was a project that's been put in the capital improvement plan over a number of years. And so when the CIP committee was together, I think they weren't surprised to see this plan. Originally, we did budget for a higher amount at $115,000. Most of the firms that did apply were lower than that amount. And so as noted in the motion, I included a budget of $85,025 for this particular project. The budget that was approved by the CIP committee in the budget also includes some funding for a demonstration project. If there's some pilot or test that the community would like to do or makes sense, that's also part of that as well. And then just sort of wrapping up with this portion, this is the timeline of how this process worked. We started in early March, and then of course COVID-19 pandemic started, and so that delayed the RFP. We actually extended the deadline, provided some more information. Firms were able to get back to us mid-April. We did, as a steering committee, review those responses and then did do some interviews of the top 4 candidates. And then we recommended, as a staff and steering committee, recommended tool design. So depending on council's consideration tonight, we'd hope to onboard with the firm this month. That's when they would do some inventory and analysis of what's been going on in Ferndale so far. There'd be a lot of community engagement throughout that entire process, but the goal would be to, end of November, early December, have a plan that the community can support and feel heard and really drive the plan. So that's really a high level. There's a lot of different tasks and projects within all of those little items, obviously, but I wanted to give you just a high level overview.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
The demonstration project, could you clarify what exactly that entails?
Absolutely. So that could be something where if there's a particular interest in a certain street, let's just say Allen Street, and let's say that the recommendation or some feedback from firm and from the community and from staff and council is, hey, we'd like to actually see what a bike lane would look like there. Just an example. And so a demonstration project that allows us to test it with, paint and, more temporary type materials and get some before and after data before really saying, if we resurface the street in 2 years, that's what we want it to look like. So that allows for some testing really. And so that was a budget that we had thought, could allow for maybe a couple of tests if it's warranted.
Are there any other questions from council? Go ahead.
I have a question. I'm just sort of curious, Justin, either from your perspective or if there's someone on the steering committee. I heard some of the benefits of how this project helps address some of the changing needs that we may have moving forward as a result of the COVID crisis. I wonder if you can share with us any of the concerns that might have been addressed from the steering committee about sort of the downside of this large of an expenditure in light of the crisis.
Sure. I would say within the committee there wasn't a ton of concern with the budget. I think most people thought that it's been so long since the previous plan and just the opportunity, I guess, with social distancing happening and things like that, that there's maybe more of a need than ever to think about how public space is used and how people are going to get around within and to and from the city. And so it seemed like most people were pretty happy with some of Tool's suggested ideas on how to, try out some things and do some temporary changes to public space to help, provide more outdoor seating or better pickup and delivery spots and things like that. So I'd say from the committee, it was mostly positive and an opportunity.
As a committee member on the selection committee member, the real difference in the 6 years in the industry is it's not just bike lanes and streets anymore. It is connecting people in a safe way to where they need to go in your downtown, and that is sidewalks, not just your streets. It's everything. And curb management, you're going to be hearing this term a lot. Curb management is changing, and how space is being used on street parkings and delivery systems as autonomous vehicles and things start to come into play. So the tool design, if I summarize the committee, felt like they could take us to the really next level and still remain a leader in this space in the region in Oakland County, and really thinking through how do we connect other systems, MOGO, busing, to this network to get people across Woodward into downtown and 9 Mile and around the community into other communities. And since Tool Design did our biking and safety audit in Woodward, they know us. One of the strategies during the Great Recession was to do investment in infrastructure as economic development. And I would say we're kind of facing the same situation, albeit the financial circumstances are different in the cause, but the impact of being able to reinvest in our community. And I think we're at this point where we really need to take a broader look than when we did 6 years ago. And so it was a very tough choice. We had 3 final candidates, and it was really finding the best fit. And in my opinion, Tool Design really practiced their equity, diversity, and inclusion. And they were the only company that had a diversity in staffing. And so they reflected their hiring policies as part of their organization. That's what really stood out to me.
Through the chair.
Through the mayor, if I may add.
Yes, please.
So, well, and to me, this is really important too, because Ferndale has a history of being, of having a fair bit of turnover. In the last 6 years, about a third of the city has moved out and new people have moved in. Whether it be people, homeowners or rentals, et cetera. So we have a new group of people that we need to understand what their needs and wants are. Really? And so that community engagement portion is so important with this project. So that's all I wanted to add.
If I may, through the chair, yes. You mentioned about this company's history with equity and inclusion. Do we know what other communities have utilized? I don't know if I saw it, but other communities have utilized this company?
Yes. So we have, with the Woodward study, Ferndale has, but also Detroit and Ann Arbor, as well as everyone from Oakland, California to Cambridge to Chicago. And then I think in my presentation I included just let me just pull it up. Fort Collins, Yellow Springs, Ohio, Northfield, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They're a nationwide firm that has offices in a number of cities, DC and Baltimore. And so I think the examples they provided were sort of more of a Ferndale scale, but also showed some of the aspirations that other large communities have. But I mean, really, they are also, I think, respected in the transportation industry in general. I've been fortunate to see them present at some other transportation conferences, and really, they had a very powerful, I would say, presentation in January of this year at a MDOT funded transportation conference, and their entire presentation was all about equity and inclusion and racial equity, and providing some of the history and how you know, transportation has not always been planned for everyone, and it was very powerful, and if I find it, I'd be happy to share it with council as well.
Thank you.
For the chair, do you mind if I ask a question that piggybacks off of Greg's?
Sure, of course, please do.
So, Greg, thanks for raising community engagement, because that reminded me that through the recent survey process, we confirmed that a fair amount of people like to receive communications from the city by mail. You know, whereas it's easier, and in a lot of ways we rely on electronic communications. So did this company talk about how they intend to reach people through non-electronic means?
Yes, I think that they really, I think they understood Ferndale, and I think through their Woodward project that helped them as well. But they shared some examples of different postcards and things like that they felt had a good response for public meetings. They also had an idea of where, kind of like the field audit sort of thing, where you could get a form mailed to you or download it and print it off and walk around your neighborhood and actually say, well, you know, this crosswalk is dangerous, or, you know, people speed on my street, and do that sort of thing. They also had a cool idea I thought of with yard signs where, you know, people can provide input that way, but also, you know, I mean, depending on what the, you know, health requirements and guidelines are in the future, we've always talked about doing sort of we call it a planner on the street method, where it could be staff or it could be someone from the firm who we go and just, you know, sit in one of the businesses downtown that may have us and just take questions for a day. And, you know, it may be a weekend and it may be a nighttime sort of thing to try and get, you know, a big response. You know, it doesn't seem like there's going to be festivals coming soon, but you could also do the same method there. And so that's something that internal staff's always wanted to do, and Tool, you know, kind of just hit that nail on the head as well on something they'd be interested in if it's permissible.
All right. If there's no other questions, we need to entertain
have
a
a
motion.
few other questions. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Do we expect to have more grant funding eligibility tied to moving forward with this as an update to our plan?
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, we've been really fortunate to get, I think it's over 7 TAP grants, which are Transportation Alternatives Program funds, which are awarded by SEMCOG and MDOT, and they're federal funds. And so we've used that on Livernois and Woodward Heights and a lot of other projects. And so, you know, really that is one of the number one reasons. The previous plan is number one reason why we have been awarded those funds. And so this really helps us to show that we have an updated plan. And so it can only benefit. I think that this plan, like I said, over $2 million in grants has really, you know, paid for itself and then some, and helped reduce some capital costs over the 6 years. We've done a lot in 6 years, but you know, more to go, obviously.
Yeah. Right. And one last question: the tool proposal, does it actually incorporate regional partnership opportunities?
I think it depends what you mean. Let me see if I know.
Sure.
Explain. My thought is that I picture this plan to be very, very action oriented with implementation line items of things that kind of like the master plan, where we can, track our goals and say, specifically to meet this goal, there's all these action items and initiatives underneath it. And so I expect that a good portion of this should be focused on action items related to regional partnerships. And if not, then you and I can keep them honest and say, why is that not, in this plan? I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but.
Well, it is. And the reason that I'm asking this is because I hope that we're not taking a misstep here with the timing. First of all, we would be passing this during an interim budget, which I do have some concerns about. But second of all, we have an election coming up, and we potentially could have a new county executive who may have a different stance towards regional transportation that may impact Ferndale in a very meaningful way. So my only concern would be that if we do this now, we may end up missing out on some of the opportunities that could be identified and could be included if we did this perhaps next year.
Sure, that's a fair point. Absolutely. I think that any sort of regional transportation proposal that may come forward, even if it looks very different than things that we've seen in the past, I think would be a much larger item. So I could see, no matter what, I think that, or I know that this plan will be engaging Smart Bus, DDOT, Oakland County, all those regional partners that we've already had, to make sure that they are sharing things that we may not even know about yet, and that they're included in this plan. And so I definitely hear that concern, but I think that this allows us to continue the momentum locally, and then probably piggyback with the county or whatever agency comes forward with a real regional plan in the future.
So are there any sort of very clearly defined disadvantages to holding off on something like this?
In my opinion, I think there is, because we are 6 years old in the plan, and this plan won't be done until December. So we would be able to start implementing grant writing right away in 2021, and it puts us working with all the partners who are rapidly responding to the changing transportation environment and mobility environment. I think mobility, again, is how you use your streets, how do you connect people to your streets, and then how do you connect them to the modes of transportation. And some of that is the responsibility of the city, and then some of that is the responsibility of the transit agencies. And if we're at this early stage, and I know SMART is really rapidly trying to rethink, oddly enough, the lack of investment in SMART in transit actually puts them in a position to think things through differently, because they aren't tied to some sort of infrastructure, technology-wise, or anything like that, that puts them in a different position. So those are the discussions that I've been having with SMART anyway. And then I know Justin and the group there has been working with the RTA, because they have been studying Woodward. So all those things have been underway. And I think if we delay, we're set back a whole nother year and a whole nother budget cycle as well. And it takes a year to apply for a grant almost and get awarded one.
Thank you.
Well said, Mayor.
All right.
I'd like to make the motion. I approve the contract with Tool the amount of $85,025 for the Ferndale Mobility Plan update from account number 202-000-977.000, the capital outlay, and 202-000-818 000 Major Roads Fund.
Support.
Motion by Polika, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May. Madam Clerk, can we have vote call, please?
Councilmember James,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May,
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski,
No.
Councilmember Polika,
Yes.
and Mayor Piana.
Yes, and that moves forward. Next on the regular agenda is 8B, is the consideration of the First Amendment to the Development Agreement between Bursa, Wanda, LLC, and the City of Ferndale, as submitted by the City Manager. Authorization for the City Manager to execute the condominium master deed, all related documents, title work, and necessary closing documents after approval of legal counsel to carry out the transactions contemplated and described in the First Amendment of the Development Agreement. And I believe our city manager is going to take us through this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the mouthful that motion was, but that is also good news. It means we're making meaningful progress on drawing to a conclusion on the development process with the DOT. And so I will share my screen. If you give me one moment, and I will queue up a presentation that will just briefly walk through some of the finer points on this negotiation amendment. Can everybody see my screen and ignore that date? I missed that update. Obviously, this is a templated presentation model. I apologize about that. But that was the last time that council received a public update as it relates to the development process. So November 25th, 2019, certainly things were much different then. Some things have changed regarding the impacts on development. And so I'm going to invite Greg Ernie, who's a representative of Bursa Wanda LLC, to just kind of discuss a little bit in more detail about how small businesses changed. Specifically, we're talking about changes in the lending environment to support small businesses. Certainly, the way that lenders are approaching speculative office, which is the way this was structured prior to COVID-19, has changed. And also just talking a little bit about residential development and the state of that in terms of whether it's financeable or not. Greg, are you on?
I am, yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was gonna try to get my video going to share my my hair because I have adhered to the governor's requirements for lockdown, but I won't allow you to see that tonight. But thank you very much for the time tonight. Really appreciate it. And I just wanted to, Joe told me I had a couple minutes, so I'm going to discuss financing, construction costs, office, retail, residential, and just the overall environment with like the MEDC and small businesses, if that's okay. So I'm going to zip through it, and then I'd love to answer any questions. I'm going to start with financing, just in general. There is liquidity in the financing market. We have great lenders as a developer, but right now the lenders have pretty much hit the pause button on projects that maybe weren't under construction. Thankfully, with a project of our size, there's many different lenders that we're going to be able to go to, and our lenders are committed to us long-term as we are to them. So solving the financing equation will definitely not be an issue long-term in the project. Construction costs, as you know, because you're building something, construction costs have been high traditionally, and there's been a lot of speculation as to whether construction costs would come down because of COVID-19, and we're not seeing that effect. Number one, labor issues are still out there, people coming back to work, people skeptically coming back to work, the logistics associated with people coming back to work and social distancing, and then it gets to importing materials and the labor force associated with that. So right now we have not seen a reduction in construction costs, especially in the more complicated parts like the 4th and the 5th floor. But we do expect, like anything, to work through this over time and for the markets to digest it and to be at least back to where we were at some point in time. However, I will say that the different aspects of the project require different kinds of construction skills. For instance, the first floor retail commercial requires fit out, which is interior construction. That's very much level to what I've seen in the last 6 months. We're catching back up with contractors being ready and able, and materials are in ample supply. So in that respect, we're actually sitting pretty good. On the residential side, for the affordable housing section, I think that will be easy to find a construction methodology that is affordable, because it's not a major, it's a 5-story building, and there's probably 3 or 4 ways in which we can build it. So we'll have our pick of how to construct that. I want to touch a little bit on office demand and the office market. There's still demand in the office market, but many tenants, even a few we were talking to, have kind of hit the pause button. There's been a lot of pause button hitting. And while the industry figures out what tenants want, while companies figure out what they want and how they have to adapt their new workforce to social distancing, or to maintain culture building, or to deal with, what I call telecommuting, but we're working from home. So right now there's a lot of speculation going on, and even companies looking at their capital allocations to new space, new furniture buys, et cetera, in light of the fact that they've had to focus on cash just to operate their business. So like I said, there's still office demand, but we're just trying to figure out where it's going to play out. And I'm active in this every day because we have office in our portfolio. So, right now I'm just kind of listening and just kind of trying to understand where people's heads are. On the first floor commercial, obviously the ground shifted right out from under retailers' feet. I mean, I really don't have to explain that. I'm happy to, but I don't think I have to. I will say that in my whole portfolio, which consists of, national credit, large blue chip tenants down to the smallest of small businesses, I will say the most honorable tenants in my portfolio are the small business tenants. They're the ones grinding it out every day. It's their livelihood. And it actually has been a pleasure to work with a lot of these tenants, even though they're in significant distress. Many of them are in significant distress, and we're trying to work through it. So I will say that, and we'll get into the different demand drivers of the first floor and what we're doing in the development agreement. But I do think there's a bit of a pause on the kind of interest we were starting to see on the first floor from true retail. And we're going to try to address that both short and long term in the amended development agreement. And then residential is still strong. In fact, the demand for affordable housing should probably increase. Right now we have about 250 units in various forms of development of workforce and affordable housing in our portfolio. And, I'm convinced that those were the right choices to make with regard to product type to be invested in. So as you'll see in the development amendment, we've kind of leapfrogged the residential to the front of the line. So I guess that was a really fast explanation for a number of demand drivers in the market and maybe a state of the industry. And I'd love to answer any questions or explore any of these topics further.
Greg, if I may, I'm just going to zip through the rest of the conversation just to kind of provide an overview of the construct of the First Amendment, but this is very fluid. So Greg, I might just kind of point to you as we walk through a slide to opine, if that's all right.
Yep, I'm here.
So I really want to clarify the negotiating priorities coming out of COVID-19. To Greg's point, we knew we had to address the timing. We had to reorganize the development timelines and the priorities for those 3 pieces, the retail, the office, and residential, in light of what Greg just discussed. We needed to address equitable cash reimbursements for the city with targeted timelines and milestones. And we needed to correlate those with updates with the revisions of the development timeline, right? The actual, our hopes and dreams about actually delivering the product. So just a quick recap, we have 3 pieces to this project. You have goal 1 was to spark a downtown office market. We thought that that was really a great opportunity to catalyze that, and we still do. We wanted to make sure that we reinforce the small business retail character and reflect the business mix that helped make Ferndale so successful to the point that we actually were growing and are growing. And we had to support affordable housing development objectives. And those objectives will be further reinforced as council prepares to adopt an affordable housing action plan in the coming weeks. On the bottom, you'll note that I just prefaced this. This has been a long project dating back to 2016, of course. And there were 3 focus groups that were organized and really provided steering direction on these priorities. And those groups really focused on tenets of the master land use plan update that we last had, city council strategic plan, and, to Justin's point, the Ferndale Moves Mobility Plan or Complete Streets. All 3 of those things intersect with the deliverables on this project, and the steering committee really helped advance the ball on that and helped us shape the priorities for the project. A couple opportunities. When we talk about office space, both Greg and our team believe that the capacity of office demand for the Ferndale area market hasn't changed. That remains intact. It's just a matter of when, not if. And as Greg referred to, due to the COVID-19 impacts, residential is really going to leapfrog and push office to the back of the line. One of the opportunities we see, though, is flexing out the retail space to allow for street-level office use. So we see that as an opportunity, perhaps, to locate a small business office tenant that could possibly be incubated into growth into the future office floor, which we'll talk about momentarily. The specific targets I mentioned, we wanted to articulate more narrow targets now that we've progressed far enough along in the construction timeline that we could probably provide some more meaningful timelines as opposed to this time last year before construction really had progressed too far. The development agreement will require us to secure commitments from the MEDC by November 1st, 2020, to commence construction of the office by September 2021, and to complete construction by spring 2022. When we look at retail, the permitted uses and character really remain the same. We're really pursuing the traditional and experiential retail, the active retail uses that is called for in the master land use plan and in our ordinances. But as I mentioned in the previous slide, what we did add was office space, and that really is to provide a more resilient and immediate flexibility for the immediate short-term need. That office space use is good for 5 years, according to this development agreement update. After that 5 years eclipsed, our hope is that the small business lending market and situation is stabilized a little bit, and we can, again, shift back to pursuing the active commercial leasing if that need needs to be addressed. The targets would be to have Bursa develop the retail space to a warm shell state. And I can let Greg speak to what a warm shell state is. It is defined in legalese within the development agreement, but he can probably translate that best to layman language. That would be a minimum goal. So the goal would be for Bursa to obtain permits by October to subdivide and improve that street level retail space, and then develop all the retail space by the end of 2021 with a commitment to construct the build out of at least a quarter of the leasable units by January 1st, 2021. So the takeaway there is we really want to show measurable, meaningful progress, even though we're working through a difficult environment. On the residential piece, all of the affordability mix, those requirements are still consistent with the development agreement that City Council approved last July. I just summarized those right there. It's really a 50-50 split with the breakdown of the 10% of units, of the percentage of units per AMI characterized there. If you have questions about that affordability mix or the action plan, I'll refer those to the CED Director, Jordan Torty, if Council does have questions about that. And targets for the residential portion, the goal would be to have Bursa deliver a conceptual plan for the residential component to Jordan's office by July 1st. And then by October 31st, we are desiring to be on the way with permit applications with commencement construction of January 2nd. And you can see the residential will be completed by December 31st. A summary of the cash reimbursement goals that we had. We wanted to articulate the value again now that we are closing in on the conclusion of the construction progress. We have more of a real actuals versus estimates, which is the year before. So the actuals, we have agreed to address $225,000 in the value of parking revenue losses as related to office-related design changes, $937,000 in office development-related reimbursements, and the legal fees and closing costs associated with the development agreement negotiation. And with that, I will just, that's really a quick overview of this amendment. You'll see in your packet, you have two documents. You have the amendment to the development agreement, and you also have the original development agreement, so you can reference all of the pre-existing terms. And we also have our attorney from Miller Canfield, Grant Williams. He is our real estate attorney, and he can discuss in detail any questions about the cash reimbursements much more eloquently than I can. The questions of counsel from for the developer or me.
Who would like to go first? I know you all have questions.
I had a question. For some reason, I feel like I read somewhere within the bundle of paperwork that the first floor office space was temporary. Is that still correct?
Yes. Yeah, there is by temporary, we mean the use is permitted for the first 5 years.
Right.
Meaning
Okay.
the developer can offer a 5-year lease agreement, and then that agreement would not be renewable at the conclusion of that 5 years.
I guess I'll start off with a comment to Bursa and Greg. I wanted to say I know the challenges with the DOT project even before COVID hit, and I just wanted to say thank you as a developer who really worked with the city to find a solution on the fourth floor. And then COVID hit and definitely turned the real estate world and development world and construction world all upside down. And I just wanted to say thank you for sticking with us. I know you had a lot of sunk costs in this project, and walking away was an option, and you decided not to, and come back and reconfigure a lot of the aspects of this very complicated project. And so I just wanted to express thank you for helping the city still fulfill its goals, albeit in a different order and timeline than we had originally intended. And the financial packages with this have shifted too, which I have some questions about, but I'll hold the financing to the end, but I'll let others ask about structure, timing, whatever. But that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for the thank you. I usually don't get thank yous at these meetings, so
developers usually don't, so it's rare.
It means a lot. But I just want, but I do want to say one thing, not to prolong it. That your team has been the reason that we're still here. Your city as well, but the team, and we have this element of full transparency that's been flowing through the project since the beginning, with Joe, Jordan, Kyle, Lena, everybody. And we have these working groups that we're going to continue. And I just want to reiterate that we're not abandoning first floor retail as well. We're looking at optionality, and our commitment is to creating a good, strong first floor commercial base. So, we're not really shifting gears unless we have to, and we're going to explore all options for the first floor. And we're going to continue to really actively and aggressively market the fourth and fifth floors. So, but thank you for the thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Are there any other questions from council at this time?
Through the chair, if I may.
Please.
So I think this is actually directed at Joe. So the original plan was office was going to be finished first, Colasanti was going to remain on site to be used as the contractor. And once the office work was done, we were going to redo that portion of Troy Street. We were going to streetscape it. Now that the order has changed, it's going to require, at least from my perspective, it's going to require that all of that construction equipment be brought back onto Troy Street at a later date. Does this postpone the streetscape? How does it impact that work? Well, let's start with that.
That's a good question. The logistics are still the logistics, no matter the order. So our intent, we will finish the streetscape, and that will be done as part of this initial deliverable. So that is solved.
You mean the completion of the parking deck?
Yes.
That deliverable.
Yes, upon the immediate
clear about that.
parking deck. So the public portion of the project is our focus, and that will include the streetscape, which already has started. That is underway right now actively.
And the alleyway, is that included too?
Yes, that has already been poured. The alleyway has a couple other architectural elements that will be added. You'll see paneling, and you'll see the vegetation for the living wall installed over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we will definitely address that. What we did learn throughout this project, at least what I learned, is that there's different portions of the project will require different crane types and sizes. And so how Bursa would plan to develop that office space, whether that be steel or concrete, could really determine how the construction would happen on West Troy and how the construction staging would happen. I can let Bursa speak to the logistics behind that, but the logistics are navigable, and we do naturally insert construction staging and traffic plans into the approvals process, so we will be able to address that and get public comment on that as part of the approvals process with the Planning Commission.
So just for clarity, our original plan was after the parking portion and the office portion was done, Troy Street was going to be opened up for all of those businesses, and everything was going to be wonderful. Is that still what is going to happen, or are we looking at a future street closure on West Troy?
That is still what will happen. We will open West Troy Street up for businesses, and we will work with Bursa and the developer and maintaining that opening, maintaining accessibility and maintaining traffic flow as a priority as we coordinate together on how development occurs for the residential.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, Mayor.
Questions?
Are there additional questions from council? Can you talk a little bit about the financing and what's changed since the order of projects has changed and the Michigan Strategic Fund is no longer structured for this current adaptation moving forward? So can you talk a little bit about how are we paying, what has changed for paying for the affordable housing, if anything?
Yeah, through the chair, I'll just facilitate that question towards Greg Ernie. Greg, if you could kind of talk about this broadly, your financial plan for that. And Jordan has been joining Greg on weekly calls with the MEDC, who oversee the Michigan Strategic Fund that the mayor just referenced. To recap, the MEDC and the Michigan Strategic Fund were active investors in this project until COVID-19. That investment interest has, I think it's still there. It's just the nature and the commitment has changed. And so I'll let Greg and Jordan speak to that.
This is Greg. I'll take a quick shot at the beginning. The MEDC support was, and still is actually, dedicated really for the first two portions, which was the 4th and 5th floor and the 1st floor commercial. The residential was always going to be kind of a separate process, and we bifurcated it simply because the commercial on the first floor and the office were always very similar in how you can finance them and the institutions that will finance them. So the good news is we did something right in bifurcating them, as I like to say, and we always intended for the residential to be financed through like a HUD loan, or probably not a MISHDA loan because that would require a different process. But we were always assuming conventional financing for construction and then takeout through HUD. And in that regard, we didn't need the MEDC for that portion as far as financing is concerned. So right now, what we're doing is we're going back and we're explaining the new timing to the MEDC, and we're going to probably try and break our current financing commitment from them into two pieces, one for the first floor and the second in the future for the fourth and fifth floors. So it would probably be like a dual track approval, if that makes any sense at all. And I will say they are committed. Joe is right. They just are very wary to overcommit because they don't know what's going to happen with their funding sources at the strategic fund level. So I get what they're doing, but we have weekly and biweekly scheduled meetings, and they're engaged. So I think that's the best indicator that there's still an interest.
Okay. And then with the amendment language, I just wanted to talk about their apartments, but we're approving condo language tonight. Can you explain that and walk us through that?
Sure. This is Grant Williams, and I'm the outside counsel on this. And so what we are doing is when you create a condominium, you have a master deed and you list all of the property that's going to go into that condominium. But as Bursa took a look at this, they thought it would be better to not have the residential be a part of that condominium. So instead, the condominium is going to be comprised of the retail units on the first floor, the parking units, and then the office space on the top floor. So there really will be 3 condominium units: retail, parking, and office. Instead of what we were planning before, which was to have 4 condominium units, one of those being the apartment building. Okay, so even though that entire apartment building would have been a condominium unit, the individual apartments within that building would still have been typical apartments and low cost or affordable housing apartments, right? So the only change that we're making is we're saying the apartment building now will no longer be part of the condominium. It will just go up and on its own as a separate tax parcel.
All right, thank you for that. The word condominium, we use it most people know it as an individual housing unit purchased for self-use. And so in this instance, in this agreement, condominium is definitely not what we're normally used to hearing about or being constructed. And so that's why I think that explanation is really important, because it stumped me a little bit too. I thought we were moving from apartments to for sale condos. That's immediately what my brain interpreted condominium.
Right.
But that is not the case.
And that is not the case. It's simply just that property won't be part of, that property will incur its own cost, whereas the common areas of the retail, the parking, and the office, they'll share those costs based on a proportional basis. So that's really a very minor change. It is an apartment building, and people will lease space, residential space.
Okay. And I did have a question about, I am concerned about the construction on our new infrastructure and the impact of that. And if a crane damages our new shared street or alleyway, does this contract delineate who is responsible for the repair of our new infrastructure? It's perceivably can happen. I don't want it to happen. I'm sure you don't either. You don't want to spend more money, but if during the construction process that happens, who is responsible for fixing it? And does this contract cover that?
Through the chair, I believe that that would be treated as a separate contract or a separate engagement when the construction is actually completed.
Okay.
Dan, you might be able to round that answer out, but that's my understanding.
This is Greg. That would go through the permitting process, like any project would. You'd have to bond for and provide insurance for any damage to right of way or public, infrastructure for sure. That's normal on any project. So it's totally covered in the construction process.
Okay.
I did learn through the phasing scenarios with Colasanti about how we would keep momentum on the street side, on the streetscape while pouring the fourth floor, that there are ways to mitigate damage to the pavers, to the streetscape area, and there's construction methods and means to be able to do that. So I think that it's also preventable to some degree.
And through this process, you're anticipating starting construction in January 2021. When do you expect to go through the Planning Commission on your site plan target time?
This is Greg. I would probably anticipate it would be the fall. We'd be going through the Planning Commission site plan approval process. We're going to take it step by step with our bringing our design forth and conceptual and moving through there. So we'll need through the summer to get through kind of conceptual design. So probably September timeframe for the Planning Commission, I would say.
Okay. So one of the major, what I would recommend is engagement with the residents around there and giving feedback. So this was the one element of this project that had no design concepts. It was just a white box space. And so I encourage the developer team to re-engage some of the residential groups to give feedback on the design. I know there's not a big leeway, but you really listen to the residents about the alleyway needs, lighting and safety, and I think that needs to be taken in consideration. If we just focus on the Planning Commission and don't re-engage, then we're missing the true nature of how we've engaged the last 4 years of this project. So I hope that's part of the process.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. We had multiple steering committee groups, and we will work with Bursa to re-engage them in making sure that they're involved in getting updates and input all the way.
Okay. All right, and then I think unrelated to this contract, and maybe you're bringing up to call the audience, but talking about the construction of the deck and when targets for that getting completed, is that appropriate now, or would you like to wait till the call to council?
I think that could be appropriate now. I don't know.
Okay.
So we have toured the site, and I'll be touring the site again on Wednesday morning. I'm pleased to say that since our last update, we had about 90% of the labor force back on site, which is good progress. It took about the month of May to get everybody back on site, but we've gotten everyone back on site, which is positive. So what I know to be true is that the fourth floor, which is the final concrete pour using the crane, should be concluded this week, which means the crane will be demobilized and moved off site, which is a great visible progress sign for our downtown, because that crane's been there for about a year. So that crane, you could expect that to be off site. I don't know how long it will demobilize it, but I'm assuming by next week. And you'll see meaningful progress on the streetscape moving forward throughout June with the LE construction refinements in June, and you'll begin to see the compactor enclosure to be fitted out and ready to do some test operating in July or August. My hope right now is that worst case scenario, we're looking at October. Best case scenario would be sometime around Labor Day. There could be very well a sweet spot depending on supply chain issues that continue to prevent orders from getting to the site, as well as just making sure, well, things we can't control are whether there's a September, October resurgence of COVID and whether that shakes up executive orders or the workforce's comfortability. But I am comfortable with saying that that is our current target based on my last progress report from Colasanti.
Okay. I appreciate that. Are any other questions from council about the agreement in front of us and or the construction timeline that we have restarted? Okay,
I don't have a question, but I would like to say, Joe, thank you for talking to me earlier. Your phrase, moving from ethereal to actionable concerning this contract, is so on point. This is a very clean contract. I love that everything's outlined as far as timelines and deliverables and costs. And this makes me feel very comfortable with us moving forward.
Good. Thank you.
Would you like to entertain a motion?
I motion that we approve the consideration of the First Amendment to the development agreement between Bursa Wanda LLC and the City of Ferndale as submitted by the City Manager.
And then underneath is the master deed as well. Second page.
Okay.
Here you can take notes in one or two motions at your discretion.
That's up to council. I recommend one motion. It's cleaner.
Okay. I also motion that we approve the authorization for the City Manager to execute the condominium master deed, all related documents, title work, and any necessary closing documents after approval of legal counsel to carry out the transactions contemplated and described in the First Amendment of the development agreement.
Support.
Moved by Mikulski, supported by Polika. Madam Clerk, can we have vote call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May,
Yes.
Councilmember Polika,
Yes.
Councilmember James,
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski,
Yes.
and Mayor Piana.
Yes, and that passes. Thank you much for sticking to this, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, the final item on the agenda tonight is the regular 8C, is the City Council Declaration of Commitment to Anti-Racism. And at the beginning of the agenda, Council approved an amendment to this declaration. And I would ask if Joe, can you pull up a copy of it to share on the screen so that the latest version is viewable by the residents who are watching?
I can. Please give me one moment to pull that up.
While you do that, I will give an introduction to this. In light of the changes happening or the discussion happening around police brutality and racism and structural racism in the nation, but really around the death of George Floyd that in Minneapolis, many cities are passing proclamations or resolutions denouncing the police brutality and unjust killing of George Floyd by the police officers in Minneapolis. They are restating their commitment to fighting discrimination and how cities are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Ferndale has designed our organizational values around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and try to our best ability to live up to those values to meet the needs of all of our residents. But it's clear that our nation has not addressed the structural racism that many of our Black community friends and family, not only in Ferndale, but across the United States. And we need to do more. And I felt a sense of urgency, and I believe all cities have, which they have, so many have passed proclamations this week, and council expressed the same sense of urgency. But I felt that we needed to step it up and do more and express that we know we need to do more and go beyond what a typical declaration like has been done in the past. And so the Declaration of Commitment to Anti-Racism was authored by me and Councilwoman Kat James. To get us started, we definitely reached out to other organizations to see if there was a resolution declaration already on the somewhere else to use as a commitment to anti-racism, and really couldn't find anything that fit the need and situation that I think that the sense of urgency that council, our entire council body felt was the right step forward, the necessary step forward. And so this declaration really is about addressing the sense of urgency that we're feeling in our community of Black Lives Matters and the peaceful protests that have been organized in Ferndale and many cities elsewhere in the city of Detroit and across the nation. And we definitely reached out in the very short period of time of 4 or 5 days to design, write the declaration. And when we published this last Friday as part of the agenda, we knew that we would get some feedback, and that feedback from the residents has been excellent. And we offer up an amendment tonight to declare a commitment to anti-racism. And to my knowledge, there's not another city that has gone this deliberate and far in its declaration to improve and put actions forward to increase equity and reduce structural racism in our policies and practices within the control of local government, and advocate where we do not have control to change policies and practices with our state government and federal government, where it's necessary to achieve equality for all of our residents in Ferndale. So that's sort of the setup, explanation of how we got here in a very short order. It is an imperfect document, and we anticipate coming up with the solid action items as part of the strategic planning process and budgeting process going forward. So with that, I'd like to have Councilwoman Kat James also speak to the declaration and how we got here and why it's important that we pass this evening.
Thanks, Mayor Piana. I'm going to focus primarily on the amendments. And first I want to acknowledge and thank community members who reached out directly to give feedback on the text of the document. The recommendation of specific items was really helpful for us to kick around and see how we could beef it up a bit. I know that in some ways it seems to say way too much about what the city's done in the past, and seem, especially in the first draft, not to provide enough specificity about what we'll do in the future, I completely get it. But to me, this document isn't the beginning nor the end of this work. It's really an acknowledgement of the recent events that have really captured the attention of the nation, both the deaths of George Floyd and the increasing groundswell of activism and support for the Black Lives Matter movement. I'll also note that I feel like so many names are missing. We mentioned George Floyd, but we don't mention Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and just countless others who really influenced this moment. But now that we are in this moment, we're making a commitment to anti-racism bolder and more clear than we have in the past. And I understand that there's much, much more that needs to be done to dismantle structural racism. And we're going to continue to have these conversations as we move forward. So to that end, the amendments that you'll see since this was originally published, the very first paragraph, I wanted to make it clear what our intent was in this document, really making it clear that this is a policy statement. We are mid-cycle. We're not in the strategic planning process right now, but this is something of great significance and import that we want to be held accountable to, and we want our staff and community to know that this is our intent. I wanted to make a slightly stronger statement acknowledging the trauma and the suffering that the Black community is feeling and has been feeling for a very, very long time, and an acknowledgement of the impact that protesters are having right now, which is unlike anything I think I've seen in my lifetime. So that's the first paragraph on your screen. If you scroll down a bit farther to the second page, thank you for following my local cues. There's a paragraph here that talks about the Metro Detroit region's formation and how it has influenced structural racism and been influenced by structural racism. And I thought it was important to add a sentence to the end of that paragraph, really fully acknowledging Ferndale's role in that. That's something that we talk about in Ferndale Inclusion Network a lot. We've talked about housing policies and some of the past planning practices in our own community that has really fed racism in our community, and we're committed to acknowledging those errors and actually confronting them and changing them. And then you can scroll basically all the way down to sort of the action item portion of the resolution. One thing that I realized, honestly, just in looking at the calendar, is that before our next meeting on June 19th, that is a day called Juneteenth. It's something that I don't think our white community members are as cognizant of, and I would like for the city to recognize June 19th this year and in years moving forward. That's the date on which the Emancipation Proclamation was finally ratified by the last Southern state, and that was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was originally signed. It has come, I think, to be very symbolic of the justice that is severely delayed to the Black community. So I'm proposing that we celebrate that holiday moving forward. I also want to call, oh, and I skipped one little tidbit right before then. I think it was our intent all along in this top sentence under the be it resolved. I think it was our intent all along to call this a public health crisis. And I think the word health just got omitted there, so I reinserted that. Moving down now to the numbered paragraphs. as Mayor Piana mentioned, pulling this together quickly, we definitely wanted to have make it clear to our staff that we want them to come to us with some recommendations on reviewing our current practices and policies and recommending how we can make them more anti-racist, really in line with some of the principles in the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And so to put a little bit more meat to this, we've asked for within the next 90 days for the city manager's office to check in with us, give a status update on the efforts by staff to do some of this analysis. Again, this is going to be something that we do moving forward for a long time, I think. But some of the things that we are recommending here that we do specifically is ask the Human Resources Department to sort of do an internal inventory of inclusive hiring and retention practices and sort of highlight what's already happening and with an eye towards seeking improvement where needed. We also would like to see the eventual development of a racial equity policy. There's some guidance within a racial equity toolkit that's promoted and promulgated by the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. That's a fairly lengthy, if you want to do it well, that's a fairly lengthy and specific plan and policy that's not going to be accomplished and checked off the list within 90 days, but we'd like to touch base and see where things are at that point, because that's going to require quite a bit of work moving forward. Similarly, I know that one of the critical key pieces that's in the public dialogue has to do with public participation and civilian participation in overseeing and giving input to police departments. So we want to talk about and find out what the recommendations are for how that looks in Ferndale. The 21st century community policing model that we've largely implemented in the community recommends it. So we are looking at getting that set up in the future, but we need to know who would serve, how large would that body be, what would their authority be, how would they be appointed. We want to begin the work to accomplish that. And then finally, following those sections, to be perfectly blunt, I just cleaned up some formatting, added "we will" to the beginning of some of the following paragraphs because they weren't completely consistent with what preceded. And then I removed 2 sentences that upon scrutiny were really redundant given the totality of the document. It's a long document. As Mayor Piana said, it's imperfect when you try to solve structural racism in the matter of a few days when really we should be doing this deep work every day and should have been doing it and have been doing it in our various spheres and need to continue to do it. We couldn't make this everything, but we tried to make some acknowledgments and make some plans moving forward. So, thanks.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you to the community members who gave input. Are there any comments or questions from council about the amendments?
Madam Mayor, if I may take an opportunity to thank you and Councilwoman James for putting in a lot of time and effort, but more importantly, You both put in a lot of heart and a lot of soul into this document, and I really, really want to thank you both for taking the time to put this together and to seek counsel from the community and input on the document. Thank you.
I also wanted to commend you. This is fantastic. It's comprehensive. Earlier today, I was reminded of something that an old boss of mine said. Democracy is a dialogue. And you've taken a lot of what the community has been asking for and made it actionable within this resolution. And that's absolutely fantastic. So thank you.
I actually have a comment, if I could, through the chair.
Please, Mayor Pro Tem.
So these particular weeks have been particularly draining throughout a community, I almost think nationally. So the fact that the city would like to take steps as far as calling to action and making aware the importance of this and it is a public health crisis. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the work that has gone forward as far as putting it together. And I look forward to keeping this document alive and well so that we can continue to prove the impact that this crisis is on individuals, particularly the Black community, and that we can move forward and continue to acknowledge that we're committed to making not only Ferndale inclusive, we're making Ferndale being, I hope, the model for other communities to follow, that Black lives do matter. And I just really appreciate the community, you, Councilwoman James, and you, Mayor Piana, for putting it together. Thank you.
All right, so.
Madam Chair, since we do have amendments that weren't available to the public in advance, I would recommend that we invite public questions and comments.
I was going to offer that. Kyle, can you see if any, at this time, we will take public comment or questions on this declaration of commitment to anti-racism? And
yes, Mayor.
If there's any call-ins or Zoom participants who have raised their hand who would like to say something, we invite you at this time.
Go ahead, Mike.
Can you unmute?
He usually calls in on the phone. Is there a phone participant?
No, not at this time, but here he is.
Good evening. I apologize. I'm not quite sure why I have issues with my Zoom audio. First of all, I would like to applaud Mayor Piana, Kat Bruner-James, Greg Pollica, Laura Mikulski, and Raylon Links-May for this incredible document. When it was first presented over the weekend, I think that my immediate response was that it needed more, and I think that that's what you probably received from other community members. I know that I immediately contacted some of the members and immediately provided some feedback. So I see that there was a lot of effort put into this document when it was initially presented, but more importantly, the actions of listening to the community, making sure that we had time to process it and make this document stronger. I, again, would like to applaud everyone on council for their efforts to make sure that it wasn't just another document, that it truly lived up to the values of Ferndale. And I think that the additional amendments that were introduced this evening truly reflect that. And I want to thank all of you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Are there any other hand raisers at this time, Kyle?
No, Mayor, I don't see any others.
Oh. All right, then. You know, it's not typical that I rush things through, not my style. But I felt like this was more important to reflect what our community was asking. And I appreciate the rapid response from our community members to help make it better in a very quick, short amount of time. And the work is just only going to get harder, and we are committed to it. But I'm also asking for patience as we navigate how to do an equity policy and things like that. And that will be a commitment from the community to participate as well. So this is a big stake in the ground today. That points us forward. So I really appreciate, again, council just saying, yes, this is the right thing to do, and had no doubt that it was the right thing to do. So I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. I do have one suggestion as part of the rapid editing process. Marnie, can you add in the whereas statements in front of each paragraph as part of the final document?
We can. We actually remove them as we have the plain language.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay. Even better. All right. So with that, we need a council motion to adopt this. And at the end of adoption, can we put it on letterhead and make sure it's accessible somewhere on the website, not buried in a council packet for accessing? I'll leave that up to the comms team, the communications team, to figure out.
Mayor, if I may also ask that this document be framed and placed in City Hall for the public to see.
Oh, great suggestion, Councilman.
If we were going to do that, I would have made it a little shorter. I think it's about 5 or 6 pages.
We'll figure out something that is appropriate.
Mayor, this is Kara. We would be happy to make sure that this is accessible on the website and a part of an easy find so that it's not buried in the council packet. We'll take care of that.
All right, thank you. All right, council, please pass a motion.
Well, can I move to adopt the declaration? Actually, let me get the accurate title in front of me before I say that. I will move to adopt the City Council Declaration of Commitment to Anti-Racism as amended and presented this evening.
Support.
That was moved by Councilman James and supported by everyone. Okay. I'm going to go with Councilman Polika. Madam Clerk, can we have vote call, please?
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody. All right, that concludes our regular agenda items, and we're moving on to call to council. And the lucky winner to start us off tonight is going to be CED, Jordan Torty.
You know what? I had a feeling, Mayor. I appreciate it. Well, thank you. I'm really excited to give a quick update. You heard from Joy earlier. I just want to very quickly give a shout out to a business update that went out over the weekend. Council has already seen this, but I just want to reiterate that for the general public. Just some things to expect over this month as the business response team starts deploying some strategies in response to COVID-19 to support our business community. So a couple things to expect. The DDA is going to be taking up at their Thursday meeting the consideration of a lease for the lot at 9 in Bermuda to basically program that space as ADA accessible public space for outdoor dining and gathering, including the provision of some amenities. Like we're looking at ADA accessible picnic tables and benches and other types of seating, given that it's sort of a semi-uneven grassy lot. But we're going to program that space if the DDA approves that. Later this month, on the 22nd, the CED department will be releasing some preliminary plans for outdoor dining and free parking for curbside pickup throughout the downtown and a couple locations along Woodward Heights, Hilton, and Livernois. So trying to make sure that our business clusters throughout the city can take advantage of opportunities in public spaces that are conducive to outdoor dining in a safe and accessible format. And we're also going to be launching a couple pilots, similar to those who might have paid attention this past winter to the downtown pilot with those igloo structures in the back of Bobcat Bonnie's. I think there was one or two other locations this year in Ferndale that did it, Detroit Fleet. We're going to be creating some pilots to allow businesses to use their own property, those who are lucky enough to have their own parking lot or additional right-of-way space adjacent to their building. We're going to temporarily waive special land use and parking requirements. So as long as you get a building department sign off and a fire department sign off for life safety, you'll be allowed to provide those sort of outdoor spaces on your own property. Think locations like Otis Supply, for example, with their own parking lot, ample space to provide that sort of amenity. And we're also going to be having expedited department reviews for those. Any interested businesses in exploring those opportunities should reach out to us now at ced@ferndalemi.gov. Reach out with the name of your business, your address, and a general description of your idea, and we can begin talking you through what that could look like for your property if it's feasible. So we just wanted to let people know that that's getting worked on now. We are also partnered up with the police department. I appreciate Chief Palazzolo. He informed me that there is also a process through the MLCC. If you intend to provide beer, wine, spirits in those spaces, there's an expedited application process. And if you have those apps in process, you can work with the police and CED to accelerate your timetable to deploy locally. You don't necessarily have to wait until the state formally blesses your application. We'll work with you. So I just wanted to let businesses know that that's going on. And I also just want to shoot that thanks back out to Joy for all her help in coordinating the PPE distribution. We handed out almost 300 kits, and we still have some more to give. So we're going to be announcing some details on that soon as well if your business did not get a PPE kit. So you can reach out to that same email, ced@ferndalemi.gov, if you're interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you also standing in for the DDA? Because I'll have the DDA go as well.
Yes, actually, Mayor, thank you for pointing that out. Executive Director Stevens is going to be on leave for 8 weeks. So I'm pinch hitting for her, and I'm really appreciative of Summer and the rest of her team and her board. So I'm going to be working with the DDA to help advance like the deployment of amenities to that lot if the DDA board approves. So I'm working hand in hand with that team as well as Joy Wells. And the big updates for the DDA are the completion of those PPE distributions and that 9 in Bermuda lease. So yes, thank you, Mayor. You got a 2 for out of me tonight.
All right. I thought that was the case. All right. Moving on, why don't we go to the city clerk because elections are coming up.
Yes, thank you very much. So as you may recall, the Secretary of State was going to mail absentee ballot applications to every voter in the state of Michigan. And I'm happy to announce that those applications were all mailed out on June 4th. So the city has mailed applications, AB applications to everyone on our permanent absentee voter list, and the state has sent them to everyone else. So all 16,000 plus of our voters should have AB applications in hand now. Those applications are good not only for the August election, but also for November. You can choose either or both elections, and your request will be honored. The format of the applications is a little different, considering they've come from different sources. So the ones that have come from the state are in a letter indicating that they're from the Secretary of State and what they're for. And thanks to the 2 new drop boxes we'll soon have, thank you for approving that this evening, there will be more opportunities for people to drop off their ballots. They can also, drop off their AV applications. They can also mail them back if that's how they prefer to get them back to us. We are checking the drop box on the front of City Hall every day, and also we get the mail every day as well. We are also accepting them by email for the first time, and we are getting inundated. So within the last week, we've received back over 1,000 already.
Wow.
Yeah, 50% of those were dropped in that little tiny drop box on the front of City Hall. And another probably about 15% were emailed, and then the rest came in the mail. So, every day we're getting more and more. Ballots will be available at the end of June, and anybody who wants to email their application or has any questions, they can contact us at elections, ELECTIONS at ferndalemi.gov. Ballots will be available at the end of June, so we're collecting those applications now and processing them into our system so that we have them all accounted for. And then end of June, we will be busy stuffing ballots. I just want to throw out that the Michigan Voter Information Center is a really great resource, and I would encourage everyone to check it out and see what you can find there. It's at michigan.gov/vote, and you can actually request an absentee ballot. It's a new feature that they put through this particular website. So you can get a sample ballot, you can check the status of your absentee ballot request, you can request an absentee ballot, you can find out who your clerk is, make sure you're registered. There's just a plethora of great information there. And on a personal note, I just want to say how proud I am to live in Ferndale, and I'm really touched by what you did tonight with the commitment to anti-racism. It makes me really proud to be a Ferndalian. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marnie. Let's go on to DPW. Dan, you're on. DPW, Dan Atostic?
There we go. Sorry.
Thank
Can
you.
you hear me? I've been listening on my phone. You guys were in my pocket. I apologize. So DPW, it's kind of summertime as usual. The one thing that we have started back up this week is the water meter replacement program. Our contractors taking extra precautions and with PPE, disinfecting of equipment in between appointments and so on. So if you have not had your water meter replaced yet, we will be sending out mailers to try and get those appointments scheduled so we can keep that program moving. Paving program's been going well, relatively smoothly. Happy with that. Our water main replacements have also been going smoothly. We're hoping that our major construction projects continue to go like this for the rest of our construction season. Fingers crossed. We have, what else have we got? We got a lot of stuff going on right now. Keeping up with the grass mowing and everything else. And then we have a lot going on, and I know our residents love our compost, but if there is ever a point where you can't find compost in your neighborhood park, we do always have compost at our yard located at 521 East Camborne. That's all I got tonight, Council.
Thank you. Getting great feedback on the quality of paving on my street. And there was a family of 5 of rollerbladers, all ages, that came down my street yesterday. And I was like, new pavement attracts everybody on wheels. So thank you for managing our contractors.
Cadillac has been doing a pretty good job along with their subcontractors. So far, very happy with the way everything has been going. And then also, I think Carlos would probably want to talk about this. I believe he's on the call, but just giving an update with the Firewood side of things that was on the agenda tonight. So I'll let him speak to that. Have a nice evening, Council.
Thank you, Dan.
Hey, good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good.
So finally, long time getting here. Firewood's ready. We have forms of payment at the DPW. We can accept cash, check, and credit card. They can also go on the online store on the city's website. We're going to provide firewood at both of the yards, both locations at 521 East Camborne and at the Southwest Yard to make it convenient for everyone. We have face cords that are available. I believe the cost for those face cords are $60. And we have oversized bundles for those that don't need a full face cord, and those go for $10 as well. And we have plenty of wood. We'll start processing more as this process moves forward, and hopefully everyone enjoys it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go on to police and fire. We'll start with Chief Palazzolo.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
I don't have anything specific, but I'm pretty sure you all maybe have a few questions for me, so I'll give each of you 3 minutes. I'm available for questions. I'm sure you've been getting peppered with questions. I've been on the phone and emailing with residents over the past week and a half, and a lot of the questions seem to be repeats. Maybe they didn't catch the curbside that I handled the other night, but maybe you're hearing something different, and they're not reaching out to me. So I'm at your service.
Are there any questions?
Through the chair. Chief, did you get the email that I sent you earlier today?
I did.
Do you mind answering that question?
So the question was, do we have a policy or do we deploy chemical munitions, if I remember correct?
Yes.
Sound about right?
Yes.
So September will be 25 years. We have never deployed chemical munitions like you're seeing on the media in the riot situation, looting, things like that. They are only accessible by a supervisor, and I can assure you that they would never be deployed unless the incident commander, which is myself or my designee if I am out of town, which would be the captain, would have to specifically authorize those. We do have some less lethal options in the form of pepper ball, taser, beanbag rounds, and things like that. And those are deployed at a shift level by a supervisor, and it would need supervisor authorization to use those outside of a taser. So they're not, the chemical munitions you're asking about are not specifically in a policy, but I've reached out to our use of force team, and that is going to be specifically spelled out in our less lethal policy.
Thank you, Chief, for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Through the chair. Chief, I don't know if you know the answer to this, actually. This might be a communications department question, but do you know if a recording of your event from last Wednesday is available for residents who couldn't make it?
It is. It has been recorded. We need to, I don't know where that link is.
Is it on YouTube?
Not on the city's page. I just checked.
Mayor, I have that recording, and I'm working to get it to Kara so we can appropriate forum.
Excellent. Thank you. I just wanted to express my gratitude to the police department for working with our protest organizers or demonstration, rally, protest organizers. And I'm really proud of our young people who are stepping up and organizing for the first time and coordinating logistics, street closures and things like that with the police department. That's one of the services they provide in helping protect our community. And your support for the marches and handing out sanitizer, masks, and the appropriate safety gear for COVID, because we're still in the pandemic, but also keeping people safe and making sure that our protests remain safe. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right, seeing nothing else, we'll move on to Chief Pesha with the fire department.
Hi, Mayor and Council.
Hi there.
Just a couple of things. We had a promotion. We had a vacant sergeant's position open because Fire Marshal Barr was our last sergeant. So we had a promotion, and I'd like to announce that Peter Michalak is now our new sergeant. Peter is one of our younger members, but he tested very well, and he's always shown all of the core values to a T. He practices them every day, and he's got a lot of respect with just 3 years on the job. I think he's going to do great, and I didn't have the opportunity to bring him up in front of council and embarrass him. He's not working today, but I just wanted to make that announcement. And then going back to Carlos's comment about the firewood, just everybody know that you need to have a burn permit issued by the fire marshal. It's as simple as going on the city's website and going to permits. Dennis or one of the inspectors will come out and measure your yard and make sure everything's safe. And it's a one-time fee of $25 as long as you live in that property. Great program. Thank you to the police and the protest organizers and all the people that participated. The fire department didn't have to get involved with anything ambulance related, which I think is good. It's important to protest and demonstrate for such an important cause, but it's also, I feel, important to be doing things safely, and I'm really proud of the community for that. And just thank you to everyone for the donations. I counted up 70 donations, large and small, from children to adults in the community, small and large businesses. It's overwhelming how much the fire department received, and it's very nice for the COVID-19 efforts. That's all I have.
Thank you. Let's see. Let's move on to Parks and Rec. There's been some changes this week. Lorena.
I'm here, and actually Lisa will be speaking tonight, so she'll be actually giving you an update on everything that she's been working on, as well as some of the things that we have going on in our department.
Excellent. You're on, Lisa.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. First of all, thank you all for your hard work on that, on everything you did tonight. I was very, very proud to be here in Ferndale. You know, you guys make me very, very proud to work for you. You're awesome. Thank you. First off, I want to remind everyone and let them know that Gleaners will be at Kulik tomorrow from 2:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Passing out food and goods for anybody who might need anything, or you might know of someone who is in need. As well as the YMCA, it's still passing out meals on Mondays and Fridays from 3:45 to 4:15. They have added also a produce box on Fridays along with their meals. And that's been going very well. The participation for that has increased with the produce box. The senior program has been going well. Our senior board is still making calls, reaching out to the seniors in the community, as well as the Metro Detroit area. And they are really, really doing an awesome job. We could not do this effort without them, and we thank them so much for everything that they do. And we just make sure that we're here to support them. Also, we've been, it's been a slow process, but we've been processing refunds for all of the activities and things that had to be canceled due to COVID. And we want to make sure the community knows you are receiving checks in the mail, and that is your refund for activities that you either did not complete or that did not take place. And that those checks will continue to come over the next few weeks. We also have a virtual 5K coming up that we're working with in conjunction with MParks. That is the Professional Association for Recreation in the state of Michigan. It's a virtual 5K. You can run it, you can walk it, which is 3 miles for people who don't know. And it will begin in September. The cost is $33. You'll receive a medal for participating, a t-shirt, and of course a healthier body. You want that. You can register soon. We'll be posting the link on our FB page, and also Kara and her team will be doing a full promotion of that. We're all registered for it, and we're working with them to get the information out and do a full promotion for it. So be looking out for that. Our city manager already volunteered. He's going to run, though. He's not going to walk. And he's going to get a team together. So please join in those efforts, and we'll have more information about that coming soon. I also wanted to talk about during the process to reopen parks for the state of Michigan, I was selected to join one of the task force to open outdoor parks and rec. So Ferndale's voice was heard for basically Southeast Michigan. We represented, our voice was heard, and even though they opened up north before they decided to let us open, they still took in our considerations, and a lot of the things that we put into writing for them, they did utilize. So I'm very proud to say that Ferndale was instrumental in reopening the great outdoors. And last but not least, not trying to toot Ferndale's horn, but I am. This is on a personal note. I am also a member of MParks, our professional association, and I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion chairperson for the state of Michigan. As that chair, I have coordinated a webinar that will be seen not only in the state of Michigan, but nationwide. It's going to have a panel discussion on a lot of things that we've been dealing with. I've aptly titled it, I'm nervous, sorry, a shift in the atmosphere. And it's basically talking about the shift that we're going through as not only a country, but as a society. We're going to really, we have a panel of 6 people from all over that are going to, as well as our director, Lorena Wheeler, who is the Great Lakes Region chairperson for EMS, which is also a professional community for ethnic minorities. And she's going to also be on the panel as well. So I hope that, we continue as Ferndalians to, make change and show people that there's nothing wrong with the shift. We need the shift. It's very much so needed, and don't be afraid of it. So I'm glad to represent you guys, and thank you. That's all from Parks and Rec.
Rock on, Lisa. Doing a great job. Thank you. All right, we'll go to Kara, communications. Anything from the good of the order of comms team?
Hi, Mayor and Council. I actually don't have anything. A lot of support of things you're already hearing about from other departments. Other than that, I don't have anything new today.
Excellent. Human Resources, Dan J.C.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to attest my support for the City Council's commitment to anti-racism, and I want to assure you that any policy, procedure, or practice that's under Human Resources purview will be actionable.
I think a lot of them might be under your purview, so I look forward to working with you closely on this with Council.
Thank you.
All right, and let's go to Finance.
Evening, Mayor and Council. We're still working stuff behind the scenes. So right now we're pretty busy putting the summer tax bills together. Those should hit the mail July 1, along with the coupons again, which I think are going to probably be very popular this year. I know there is some state regulation about some of the changes in allowing other communities to pay on a as-you-go basis, like we do with our coupons, and divide them up and extend the time. And, you know, people are really pushing back on that. So I'm super happy that we have that service already for the citizens of Ferndale, and that they can take advantage of that without having to jump through any hoops, and that we're able to just mail them the coupons and use them. And if there's any questions, or if you want to make sure that you're on that list, if you don't have a mortgage, those should be coming to you along with the time that the tax bills come out. It's a little wonky on the timing, trying to get them all put out together. We can't get them in the same envelope, which would obviously be the optimum way to handle it. But the amount of physically handling each document to make sure, because it all has specific information on it for the individual residents, so we can't just have them all in one envelope. So you'll probably see them in 2 envelopes again this year. But please just reach out to my staff if you have any questions about that. We are still answering the phones and moving things forward. I'm also super excited to get started in building a priority-based budget that we can really see the things that we are doing for the community and how they're impacting the community and how the dollars are being spent. I think it's going to be super transparent. I think you guys are going to love it. And I think it's going to be really easy for me to help everyone understand where their tax dollars are going and how they're being spent and how they're effective. So I appreciate you guys pushing that through tonight. And that's about all that we have from Finance, unless there's any questions.
All right, and then Legal Counsel, Dan Christ.
Just a couple of items, Mayor. As the governor's executive orders are starting to lift, just a reminder that as of right now, the next council meeting, the meeting on the 22nd, the regular council meeting, will be the last remote electronic meeting that is authorized under the executive order. It's still possible that it could get extended, but as of right now, that would be the last regularly scheduled meeting. And just a secondary issue, the governor's executive order regarding the stay on the processing of FOIA requests, that has been lifted, and so those requests for city public records will be lifted on June 11th of this week. And that's all I have, Your Honor.
Through the chair, may I ask a question?
Of course.
I don't know if you got my email earlier today, but I had some questions about reference to a police and fire board that we have in our city charter. I think it's chapter 3, sections 23 and 24. Did you have a chance to look at that?
Councilwoman, I have not yet looked at it. I did receive a forward of an email from Joe late this afternoon, and I will have a response to you this week.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Dan, could you clarify whether that digital meetings order extends to boards and commissions, so our boards and board liaisons set expectations for July?
Well, it does apply to boards and commissions as well. So once that executive order is no longer operational, all boards and commissions of the city, all public boards and commissions of the city will have to follow the requirements of the Open Meetings Act.
And a reminder for council and the viewing public, at the previous meeting we did stipulate a reminder that boards are required to meet in public buildings. So at this time, the Kulik Center,
to the extent that they're available, I mean,
to the extent that they're available, and at this time, the Kulik Center, I don't anticipate that will be available, but we will be making City Hall, all of the rooms and council chambers available for public meetings. So your liaisons should be coordinating the use of that building into the scheduler, and I'm sure the city clerk and the liaisons will be sending out some communications about that.
Excellent. All right. Joe, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, why not?
All right. City manager, what's up?
Yeah, thank you. Just comments and updates. I did attend the protest march this weekend in Ferndale on Saturday, and I just want to use this opportunity as a few acknowledgments. One, I want to acknowledge the youth who put everything together. I'm really impressed by the just the resources within our youth, the resilience and the creativity and just the energy behind their ability to lead these initiatives forward. I could barely tie my shoes at 18, so congratulations just to them, and congratulations to those graduates who did. It sounded like I think 2 of them graduated this weekend or last week. I also want to acknowledge the speeches provided by Mayor and Raylon. I was able to watch those, and they were really good and meaningful conversations that were happening. And finally, I just would acknowledge the work that our police department and DPW and fire departments do behind the scenes to make sure that these events are as safe as possible and inclusive as possible, and coordinating with all of the protesters in advance. There's a lot of meaningful work done there behind the scenes to make sure that it's a safe environment for us to exercise our First Amendment rights. It was done really well, so just a couple acknowledgments there. Secondly, on the virtual 5K, this is just a call out and prepare you for a call out. I will be calling out our staff leaders and our city council and some of our community civic leaders on joining me in participating in the virtual 5K. I don't know what shape that's going to take yet, but I'm just putting you all on notice. I'll be calling everybody out to join us and participating.
Sign me up.
Biking, jogging, running, doing whatever you want, just participating and getting some funding opportunities for our Parks and Recreation program. More serious announcement, City Hall will be reopening, as we discussed previously in the May presentation, on June 15th to internal staff only. The public may have seen an article on that locally published, but our intent is to open partially for staffs in a controlled manner with our new reopen policy between June 15th and the end of June. That will give them a few weeks to acclimate to the new normal within City Hall. I want to make sure that our staff are comfortable operating in there, so we may make sure that the public is comfortable with interacting with them when we intend to partially reopen City Hall on July 6th to the public. Those hours have not been determined yet, but I do intend to provide an update on what those hours will look like to council by the June 22nd public meeting. One more acknowledgement, the recovery outreach conversations are on their way. I had a great meeting with the Ferndale Housing Commission director, the library director, and the school superintendent. They met with Raylon and Kat and I to discuss how we can get good direct feedback by all spectrums of our community to make sure we understand how the pandemic has affected a diverse array of people amongst the community. So we hope to provide reports for council to consider in terms of policy and investments as it relates to COVID by the end of July. And I know we have, as I mentioned in the previous presentation, 5 teams working on 5 different focus areas. Jordan alluded to the progress he's working with the mayor and the rest of his teammates on the economic team. So you will see updates on those reports in July. And that's it.
Thank you. All right. I think I got everyone on staff, so let's move on to City Council. And I will start with Councilwoman Kat Bruder James tonight.
Okay, before I forget, I'm just going to note that there's a kids rally and march to end racism in Metro Detroit that's just been announced for this Saturday in Ferndale. It starts at 10:30 a.m. Gathering at the corner of 9 Mile and Bermuda, and there's more information on a Facebook event. I might take a scotch over 3 minutes tonight because I wanted to acknowledge some of the intensity over the last 10 days or so. During that time, I've really been trying to listen more than I talk. And I've been really focusing on raising the volume of Black voices on my personal social media. And I've purposely avoided making what's happening in the nation about me, because that's not what this is about right now. But for the benefit of our residents, I do want to talk a little bit about where I'm coming from and my approach to some of these issues. As many of you know, I'm an attorney who specializes in representing victims of police misconduct. I've been doing this kind of work since I was in law school 15 years ago. And the first time I remember hearing a Black man cry out, "I can't breathe," was a video from June 1st, 2006 of Clifton Lee in Ypsilanti Township. Washtenaw County deputies had just sprayed him directly in the face with pepper spray and held him down on the ground until he died. His brother Bruce was also pepper sprayed, hog-tied, and thrown face down into the back of a squad car. Neither man committed any crime whatsoever. They were checking on their nephew, who had just gotten pulled over a few doors down from their house. There's a lot more to that story, but suffice it to say, I've been doing this work for 15 years, and many families have described to me the pain and fear that they encounter when interacting with bad police. I've also seen the racist and violent emails that some of these bad cops sent to each other, including one that was sent on June 1st, 2006, right before this all happened in Ypsilanti Township. I've seen officers misgender a trans woman repeatedly that they've interacted with and treat her with such disregard that it led to her brutal death. That was a woman named Shelly Hilliard, who some of our community members are very familiar with. Last week, I talked to a friend of mine who's a Black sergeant in mid-Michigan, and he's struggling. He reminded me that after he was forced to leave his job a few years ago, his old boss was caught, recorded, saying, "We should step on their necks like we used to." And those words have been ringing in his ears ever since he saw the footage of George Floyd being killed in the same way that his boss described wanting to kill him. So in doing this work, I've learned a lot about how and why so many bad cops get away with it. Bad leadership, union protection, no accountability, bad training, and community members who turn a blind eye, often because they have racist baggage that convinces them that it wouldn't have happened unless the victim had done something to deserve it. So I have a healthy dose of cynicism when it comes to law enforcement. So when I got more involved with the Ferndale Inclusion Network a few years ago because I wanted to help raise the racial consciousness of Ferndale, I was hesitant about having Ferndale police involved right away. But when I first met Sergeant Brown, I was disarmed by how comfortable he was talking to me about the tragedy that Shelly Hilliard's death and the failures that led to it. He impressed me again in another early conversation where he described teaching a class of criminal justice students about the racist origins of law enforcement. Since then, I've had some really enriching conversations about racism in law enforcement with Chief Palazzolo and others within the department. I rode along with one of our officers right before the COVID shutdown, so I've never really had an opportunity to talk about that experience. And I was surprised within minutes of our introduction completely unprompted, he acknowledged the trauma that so many people feel being pulled over by police. He described his approach of simply not pulling drivers over for things like expired license tabs because he recognized that sometimes economic circumstances don't warrant going through that trauma. These experiences have given me hope in something that in times in the past I thought was hopeless. Our command staff impresses me in ways that I didn't anticipate being impressed. And that doesn't mean that we don't have work to do. I think that we have fertile ground for even more growth. I know our officers are feeling down right now. I get that. I also know that many of our officers understand the context in which this is all happening and the fear and trauma that's happening throughout the Black community. I also know that our officers have the support of many people in the community. And I also know that there are plenty of residents who are disappointed that council didn't take a more drastic action tonight, and that's understandable. As a community, we have to have some deep conversations moving forward about what public safety in our community looks like. We're still researching the defund movement and what that looks like for smaller communities. Right now, there's a lot of confusion about whether or not that means disbanding and abolishing the police altogether. And I'm already seeing residents opposing that kind of stuff and expressing concern about the detrimental effect of underfunding. And I think a lot of residents are supportive of simply scrutinizing law enforcement spending, eliminating militaristic items and reinvesting in services that benefit residents and visitors. So assuming that we're looking at something closer to the latter, we need time to carefully consider what that looks like in Ferndale. So these conversations continue beyond tonight, and thank you for letting me go a little bit long.
No, I truly appreciate the thoughtfulness of your words tonight. So thank you. Let's go on to Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May. We need you to unmute.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
All right. First of all, Kat, thanks for stating that. That was very powerful and very meaningful. So I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and sharing what it means to you and your commitment to move forward on this long haul of a fight. But I just want you to know I appreciate that. I've got a couple things to say tonight, so I hope it won't go too long because I know we've been here long enough already. But I would like to first start off by saying, on a lighter note, that we all know that the Ferndale High School graduates graduated by way of, and the University High graduates and TCEC as well, graduated by way of drive-through this past weekend. One of the speakers at the event, the march on Saturday, one of the, not the speakers, but one of the organizers, Kyra, got it right, Newman. I don't know if you guys know this or you would know this, but just the day before at graduation, she was awarded the John F. Kennedy Award. That's awarded to only one student, one girl student, one male student. And you're voted by a whole group of your peers and counselors in order to get that reward. And it's just very prestigious. And I didn't know that she got it until I looked at a posting just the other day. And she went and graduated through a pandemic by way of drive-through, received that prestigious award, and the very next day came back and provided us with, participated and collaborated on such a monumental march. And I'm so proud of the young people that we have in this community, and I'm so proud to see, I look forward to seeing the just the monumental steps and changes that they're going to put forth in this community and this nation. It was just something to see, and I just wanted to share her praises because I know you probably didn't know that she received that. I also want to congratulate my nephew Miles. Miles has some learning challenges and graduated this past Friday night, and I could not be more proud of him. So I just wanted to give that shout out because I know he's going to look at this recording of this council meeting, and we call it Miles, who's just surpassed one of the other many milestones that he has to look forward to in his life. And I just want you to know that Aunt Raylon loves you, and I'm proud of you. Another thing is that, I don't know, it was kind of overlooked, but Ferndale Public Schools have Teacher and Staff Persons of the Year every year that's voted on by their peers. And I don't know if you all knew this, among all the other individuals who have won this prestigious acknowledgement, one of them was our own Allison Shank as support Staff of the Year. So I don't know if you guys knew that, but she did earn that title and gain that award. And one last thing is that I want to publicly thank everyone who has personally reached out to me to find out how I was doing in the past couple weeks. I feel like, as a mom, I'm always the one kind of reaching out to everyone else and taking care of everyone else, but I was just really touched by the people who reached out to me by way of mail, email, phone calls, Facebook Messenger, just to see how I was doing. Because again, it's been a draining week and it's been very tough. And I really appreciate all of you for stepping forward. I appreciate this council for taking the steps that they're taking. And I just want to recognize that we're all in this together. So I'm really proud of you guys. And thank you for thinking about me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilwoman Mikulski.
Just a few things. Again, to echo everyone else's sentiment here, silence is not an option. I'm incredibly proud of our city. We're absolutely a leader in showing our commitment, and we're not just paying lip service. We're showing a true commitment to anti-racism. Beyond that, a quick reminder, the June beautification nominations are due by June 15th, so that's coming up very quickly. You can nominate anyone who's improved their property or even a business. And you can do that through the Facebook page. There is a survey within their Facebook page. I wanted to thank our Ferndale Garden Club and VFW 1407 for their efforts to help install a Blue Star Memorial marker. If you're not familiar with it, the Blue Star Memorial program began in 1945 as a way to honor all members of the armed services. My hope is that we'll be able to have a proper dedication since we weren't able to do so during the Memorial Day parade. And last but not least, I want to acknowledge and thank our Ferndale Arts and Cultural Commission for undertaking the massive effort to complete a Ferndale Art Census. If you're an artist, I encourage you to add yourself to the database and connect with business, government, and community collaborative opportunities. The census survey is located on the new website, FerndaleArtsAndCulturalCommission.com. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councilman Polka.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to also thank all the staff and the departments in the city. I couldn't be more proud of how all of our employees have performed over the last couple of weeks and in making these events happen, helping these events happen. And I couldn't be more proud of the people who participated in the events in Ferndale. I'm still a little COVID concerned, so I've kind of been on the edges of a lot of these events. sometimes a little further distance, but I couldn't be more proud of how everyone was handling that. And I think these events are important in everyone expressing their voice, particularly people of color. And this is not a but, and those voices need to be expressed at the ballot box. And when those votes are cast, that though the people you're voting for are people you know. I think one of the positions that isn't well researched, and I sometimes think people just vote based on the name, are judges. And let's keep in mind that a judge is going to decide the guilt or innocence in the case of these police officers. Is that judge someone that you would have voted for? I know it's in a different state that technically you wouldn't have voted for that person, but when we go to the ballot box, the people that we vote for impact our lives in so many different ways. And so the rallies are fantastic, and it is getting the voice out. And I ask you to also voice your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So I'm going to close out, and it's going to be a summary of all the great comments of council members tonight. And I wanted to start with sort of what I started my comments at the march on Saturday in Geary Park, and the heaviness that I felt, that I feel that everybody's feeling right now. The heaviness of the pandemic, the heaviness of the political dialogue, and the presidential campaign that is really facing all of us, and really important in November. And then the heaviness that has always been there for our Black community of racism. And when you have social protest, America was founded on protest, and we are truly living the values of voices coming together to make change. And that change is definitely needed. And the pandemic really showed the inequities in our systems that don't take care of people. And we have real big disparities in health and economic opportunity and housing. And we need to solve these. And how we solve them is through policy and practice at the local level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level. And echoing what Councilman Pollock has said, that it really truly is who you vote for into office to make those changes at the policy and practical level. And so for everybody out there, the call to action for you is, if you don't know someone who's voted or isn't registered to vote or hasn't turned in their application to get an absentee ballot, is to make sure that you find 5 people and encourage them to get a ballot and then go vote. That really is what we need to have happen in our country come November. But I also wanted to talk about the heaviness of our city staff and the heaviness of taking on responding to COVID. Cities everywhere, city staff everywhere is doing admirable jobs. And I just want to say how important our staff is to making our quality of life here in Ferndale. Without you, our city would not run. And we would be very unhappy in Ferndale if our services weren't continuing in a way that we need during the pandemic. And I know you are all working very hard, have worked so many hours above and beyond a 40-hour work week to make sure that we have truthful and timely information and that services are being provided and that you have rapidly found solutions to challenges that nobody's ever had to deal with before because of the pandemic. And in many cases, you may be working, not expecting higher raises this year. We've had to definitely put in some economic restraints around compensation. And I know that is like the worst decision a council person has to make around that because it impacts your life and impacts your family. And I just want to say how important you are to me. You make council look better because you deliver on what we said that we were going to do, and you make the Ferndale team what it is. And your professionalism has just been on par and exemplary. And so I just want to say I love you guys, and I love working with you. I'm glad you get my humor. And don't mind my swearing. So, that's what a team is all about. And so I just want to say thank you. And then I wanted to address, I've been getting a lot of emails asking to defund the police. And as Councilwoman James has said, that the policies around funding our police definitely need to be taken a look at. But not all police departments are equal. And what is happening in Minneapolis is because of some power structures there that don't exist here in a manner that exists there. And what may work well for Minneapolis may be considered, but may not be the best option for Ferndale. So I am not in favor of the definition of defunding police means dismantling. That is definitely not something that I'm willing to do, but definitely will be taking a look at where are changes that we can make as part of our reform process, because our police department has been making these very progressive reforms for the last, since 2016 under Obama's 21st Century Community Policing. And we have accomplished quite a lot. But as Councilwoman James says, there's fertile ground for a lot of change going forward in discussions. And so this is going to be a work in progress. This is going to be a community conversation, and it's going to have to tie into our strategic planning process and budgeting process as well. So I am committed to taking a look at where it makes sense to make those changes in policy and practice, but still provide the healthy and strategic crime reduction strategies that cities are expected to provide and protect their citizens. I think everybody who has someone break in their home wants the police to show up. And at least that's what I'm hearing in Ferndale so far. So I also wanted to say to our police department, I know it's very challenging conversations going on nationally, and that I appreciate everything that you're doing on behalf of our community. You are leaders in the space of reform, and you have chosen that path. And I appreciate you listening to council over the years saying that's the path we need to go down, and the police chiefs and the captains championing that direction. We wouldn't be here today because of your leadership in the reform process. And then I also wanted to say to our police officers who may be feeling threatened at home or being accosted by the public because you're a police officer, which is a very noble profession to be in. And I just want to say I'm sorry that that is happening to you. And I hope it does not happen in Ferndale here to you while you are working on behalf of our community. And I don't think that is right either. You don't attack someone who knows there needs to be change and is working hard to make change. So I just want to say I'm committed to you as your mayor, and to be a partner in these hard conversations that we have to have going forward as our commitment to enacting anti-racism in our declaration. So I just wanted to say hard work ahead, and I will walk that path with you. So thank you tonight. Thank you to our residents, and thank you to everybody who knows that change is within ourselves, and we're responsible for making it happen. And with that, I'm calling it at 10:19. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.